session now is about super pollutants, clean air, and health. We want to talk actually about the same topic, but with a health and air pollution angle. And first, I would like to take the opportunity for those of you who are not in this room in the morning to thank Jane and Clean Air Fund for co-organizing the session with us. We have all the day planned together, and then the focus of the session today, we will cover 3 points. First is the science behind super pollutant, climate and clean air action, the integrated action, and more focus about like what are the issue from a health and air pollution perspective, and what are the solutions. And then we will have a panel on Africa Clean Air Program, regional cooperation, and we have a keynote speech from city leader from London. So now I'll hand over to Jane to give the first keynote.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very excited. I'm excited that London Climate Week is so busy. It feels like there is such a buzz. And I'm also super excited that there's so many air quality events. New York is not like this, and we need to continue it. I remember when we were setting up the Clean Air Fund at New York Climate Week back in 2019, and we got a spot on the UN General Assembly stage. It was quite terrifying. They sat me in. I knew it would be in the UN building, but when they took me to the kind of speaker area, I sat between Greta and Mark Carney, and I was like, okay, where is this speech going to be again? I was the only person talking about clean air that day and that week, except for Donald Trump. I remember I did my little kind of launch, we're the Clean Air Fund, this is what we're going to do. We're a philanthropic re-granter for those of you who haven't encountered us before. And the Prime Minister of India, Modi, was going to speak just after me. So Trump, who had not attended Climate Action Day, had come in to listen to Modi and was sat there in front of me whilst I was giving my talk. And I went into the, after I did my talk, got over the terrifying nature of speaking with Trump, sat right there, went back to the hotel later, poured myself a glass of wine, turned on the news, and there's a journalist interviewing Trump as he heads out of the UN building. And the journalist said, President Trump, do you care about climate action? And Trump said, well, I can say that I care about clean air. And I was like, that was me! I did that! So yeah, only 2 of us, Trump and I, talking about clean air 6 years ago. Many of us talking about clean air in London Climate Week. And it's just fantastic to see the momentum that all of us collectively have built over those last 6 years. Which also was massively reflected in this WHO Air Quality Conference. They had their second global air quality conference ever in Cartagena, in Colombia earlier on this year. Who was there? How many people in the room were there? They launched a global target for reducing pollution. It's 50% reduction in deaths from anthropogenic pollution by 2040. And it's really good to have a collective target to get behind. The World Bank also launched a flagship report, which if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. It's a very, very hefty report, full of the most amazing charts on air quality and the economic benefits of tackling it. So I would recommend looking at both of those 2 things. The World Health Organization target got endorsed by unanimously by all countries at the WHO, the World Health Assembly, in May, and they're now asking countries to put forward commitments up until Clean Air Day. I think we've got just over 20 countries have put in a commitment. So if you haven't, you can see Peter there in the front row. I'm assuming Ghana will have submitted your targets, but if not, WHO is inviting you to make one. And the World Bank report showed that it's not only feasible to make these reductions and save these lives, but it's also very affordable. Their previous study had showed pollution is costing us 6% of GDP. This one said that the economic benefits, if you integrate climate action and action on air pollution, is 2.4 trillion by 2040, which is a mind-blowingly large number. And so finally from me, a little bit on super pollutants, which I feel the momentum is also building for. They're one of the best opportunities to very quickly start to get us back on track to meeting no more than a 1.5 degree temperature rise by the end of the century. Obviously we need to keep all of our commitment to reducing carbon dioxide, and that's very long-lived. Super pollutants are fast-acting climate pollutants that actually have been responsible for more than half of the global warming that we've seen so far, but have not had the same amount of attention, maybe methane in recent years, but certainly not the other super pollutants like black carbon and tropospheric ozone, which is a shame because they really affect human health. Water scarcity, for example, when black carbon lands on snow and ice and makes it melt faster, agricultural crop yields, and many other things. So throughout this session we're going to be hearing from experts and policymakers who are working on super pollutants and on integrated air quality and climate action for people's health. So we will start with a talk from Mette Koban, the Deputy Mayor of London, if you want to start coming up, Mette. And then we will follow that by a presentation from Professor Andy Haynes, who can't join us, but he's recorded a video. Mette has been so busy this week that I think he's probably already experienced 3 months worth of air quality events in environment events in the space of just 2.5 days. So thank you for your time, Mette, and I know once you've spoken you're going to have to scoot off fairly quickly. But thanks in part to Breathe London, the citywide air quality monitoring programme and citizen activation programme that's deployed over 400 sensors already, and is backed by a new investment by Bloomberg Philanthropies. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, helped to launch Breathe Cities, taking this work global, and Mette is playing a key role in making London's leadership visible on the international stage, as well as all the hard work that he does here. So very interested to hear your remarks, Mette. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Look, let me firstly start by taking the opportunity to thank the coalition, but also to thank Jane from the Clean Air Fund. I think you're absolutely right. It's great that there's been so many air quality events this London Climate Week. But because I think, it's a massive, I think often, because it is in so many ways seen as like a cultural war issue, particularly here in London. I feel like sometimes people don't want to talk about it, but I think it's so important that we put it at the centre of the stage. So let's give a whole round of applause to everyone who's been involved in putting air quality events this week. My name is Mette. I'm the Deputy Mayor of London for Environment and Energy. And of course, I oversee our policies on how we can make sure that we can deliver on our committed WHO guidelines by 2030. Look, I think firstly I want to start a bit by telling you about London's journey. I also want to tell you a bit about my own personal journey, about how I got interested in environmental affairs in London. I come from a neighbourhood where I used to be a councillor for 10 years before becoming Deputy Mayor. A place called Hackney. Hackney is a very trendy and hipster place to live now. But when I was growing up, Hackney actually disproportionately had one of the highest levels of pollution, toxic air, but actually in so many ways as well had very low ownership levels of cars, but suffers from disproportionately from through traffic that we have across our borough. And as a result, so many children, including myself, I was in primary school when I was first taken to the GP and given my inhaler pump, and being terrified, looking at Mum and saying, "Mum, what's this thing that they're giving me to take with me to school?" When I had to first have an inhaler pump. And so many of my friends also had asthma, and so many kids across our city are never going to be able to grow up with the full potential of their lungs because it's been stunted from a young age through something that they never caused in the first place. And that's why it's such a social justice and racial justice issue for Londoners. But also it has a huge impact on our economy, and I want to talk to you a bit about some of the work we're going to be doing in London in terms of being able to measure our policies and the impact it's having on our economy, on the NHS, etc. So, this in many ways is one of the topics that really got me passionate about London and our journey. And I first started my journey in Hackney, leading Hackney's Green New Deal, but a key part of Hackney's Green New Deal was the work that we were doing around transport emission and actually improving air quality. We delivered an air quality action plan with 47 actions that we were doing right across in our borough, everything from engine idling to what we were doing around raising awareness on wood burning, but also leading quite transformative policies when it comes to traffic calm measures. We delivered over 20 low traffic neighbourhoods in the space of 2 years, over 50 school streets right across our borough, so many street trees that help improve air quality. Everything we've done from car-free development, 20 miles per hour to 100% control parking, how we reimagine our curbside spaces. There was so much interventions that took place right across our borough, including making sure that we had much more alternative forms of transport in our borough as well. And in so many ways, partly the reason why I think I landed with my job and the key ask from me, from the mayor when he first asked me to take on this role, was to make sure that actually we're working very closely with councils when we're delivering our air quality objectives and ambitions. And actually just last week I went to launch the Westminster Council's new air quality action plan, which is quite a bit ambitious in so many different ways, and that we can only really achieve our ambition by working together. James spoke a bit about Breathe Cities, and London obviously was started Breathe London. It was a founding member of Breathe Cities, and Breathe Cities is incredibly important because it's the way in which got to recognise that the air quality crisis, air pollution doesn't just stop on the borders of London. It travels, and we can only really achieve our ambition on this agenda by working across different cities, but also learning from other cities too. Bogota, the work they're doing around the clean air zone is incredibly important. We're also working across Jakarta and the work that they're doing, and in Accra, for example, particularly around the monitoring that they've got. Monitoring is so important. And I think it's something that we've been inspired by the work that has been happening in Accra, because it helps you tell a better story to Londoners about being able to actually target your interventions in a way that allows us to be able to actually take drastic action. So look, in London, of course, I know there's a lot of attention on the delivery of the ultra low emission zone. It's the world's largest clean air zone. By far it's been a huge success by any measure. Whether you look at carbon emission reduction, roadside nitrogen dioxide levels are down by 54% in London, over 27% right across London, significantly improving the air that people breathe across our city. 97% of vehicles that you see on London's roads now are compliant with our clean air, with our air quality standards, and that's been partly because we backed up our policy with a £200 million scrapping scheme, helping support 54,000 vehicles to much more cleaner forms of vehicles. So that's the social justice element as well. It's making sure that working people have the support that they need. And I'm very proud to say, I always talk about this, and I know people would have heard me say this before, but when the mayor first got elected in 2016, these things don't happen by coincidence. You need brave political leadership. And when the mayor first got elected in 2016, they said it was going to take 193 years for us to reach legal limits. And that's just legal limits, and you can argue how much more further we need to go. But we're on track to reaching that this year, over 180 years quicker than what was originally said. And there's a really good actual graph which I don't have. I think you would have seen it in Cartagena when we were there, and it shows the roadside nitrogen dioxide levels, NOx levels, and you'll see it's pretty stagnant for many years. And then if you look at it from 2016, you just see a sharp drop all the way to where we are now, and that's because of bold political brave decisions that we've been able to take across our city. But the next phase for us is really thinking about, we need to go further. We've got a committed to WHO guidelines by 2030, and we're very serious about how we get there. There's a number of things that we are doing. We made an announcement yesterday on the next phase of Breathe London, which is again looking at expanding our monitoring sensors right across our city, but also making sure that we're equipping all the key stakeholders and organisations with the sort of tools they need to communicate, but also further accelerate around this agenda. And I think that's really important because when we were in Cartagena, one of the key things that we were discussing was how this is a massive public health issue. And actually, I remember having this conversation with the Vice President of the European Parliament, Jaime Lopez, who passed the Air Quality Directive in the European Parliament. And I remember he was saying to me, because like whenever you hear me speak about this issue, whenever I talk about climate change, I often talk a lot about social justice and racial justice, and I think it's really important. And I think like in many ways, it's a bit like the Brexit thing, right? Not to like confuse the two things, but like you could probably put out a whole dossier of stuff making the case for why Brexit was wrong or why remaining in the EU was right. Like there's so many facts about it, and probably very little facts on the other side. It's the same thing with taking action on an air pollution. Like there is so much scientific evidence about why we need to tackle toxic air pollution, whether it's from the impact it has on people's diseases, whether they've got asthma and dementia, whether it's around sort of like we know in London, for example, more than 4,000 people die every year of premature deaths that we have linked to toxic air. There's so many cases that you can put forward, but what we need to do is, I always think to myself, like I'm quite young. I got into politics very young. I was 21 when I was first elected. I'm 32 now, and I often reflect on someone like myself. It's like, how do you look at someone like me, probably 10 years ago, and say, Mete, like even now, when we had the 1 year on ULED report, I have to be briefed about like some of the data and what it means, and I'm a victim there, right? How do you go outside there and speak to your average person and say, hey, like Joe Blogg's, like for example, ULED's carbon emissions are down by like 4%. They're looking at you thinking, what are you talking about? What does 4% like carbon emission reduction mean? Sounds good, but like I don't really know. And what we need to do is we need to be able to communicate this in a language that is better, gets us more political buy-in to do more stuff in the future, and actually builds the support and the coalition that we need right across our city. And so one of the key things that I've been working on is looking at, for example, we've got some really good stats around estimated figures around the impacts of some of our policies on on the NHS and the cost of it. But what we are now going to start to do from City Hall is we're undertaking some work to start to get actual real figures on what we've been delivered and what we know has happened as a result of policies that we've taken, be it on GP admissions, be it on hospital admissions, be it on cost of work as well. That's really important too. And being able to go out there and actually communicate these things, I think, in a way that Londoners understand would, I think, get us more buy-in. But again, a lot of the focus here in London has been on transport emissions, and I just want to say there's been a lot of work that we've been doing right from construction, the London plan, what we've been doing particularly around, like raising more awareness around wood burning. We know that that's also a big issue for us here, and we've been working with government and DEFRA officials to try to sort of get more action around that and getting the support that we need to transition away from that. There's so much more to do, and that's what we're going to be doing next phase, which is basically setting out pathways to how we can reach the WHO guidelines, and hopefully that will come out a bit later this year. And what's been really good part of that exercise is actually the engagement that we've been having with lots of different stakeholders as part of that, and making sure that actually is co-produced, co-designed. So it's not just like, it's Mete's idea for how we can reach WHO guidelines. This is actually co-produced, co-designed with experts in their communities. But look, the final thing I would just say before I finish is, I think we've got to have this conversation in partnership with other cities around the world, and that's why the Breathe Cities framework is a network is really important for us. We're obviously so chuffed for London Climate Action Week. Over 700 events that are happening there's so many professionals here. We had Clean Air Day last week, where we had a letter of over 450 healthcare professionals walking from Great Ormond Street Hospital to Parliament Square just there. Together I walked with them as well, raising awareness around this issue. I think there's a lot of momentum, and I think we've got to really get behind it and hopefully deliver on a much more equitable society that puts people's health really at the forefront. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day and have a great London Climate Week. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in what is an incredibly busy week for you. and for all of your remarks. There's so many of the themes that we're going to be talking about in the panel there. Not least, are we on the edge of these culture wars? We're being led to believe so by the press, but it's the case that Sadiq Khan, after introducing ULEZ, got re-elected on a much larger share of the vote than previously and a much higher turnout. And not least because we can promote the health impacts of the ultra-low emission zone. So on that note, turning to a video now from Professor Andy Haynes, who will focus on the health impacts.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak about the health impacts of air pollution, and a particular focus on super pollutants. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you in person due to unforeseen circumstances. So let me start with this slide, and I know that probably other speakers will talk in more detail about super pollutants, so I won't say very much. But just to say that obviously CO2 is the greenhouse gas that we're most familiar with in general, but a very substantial proportion of emissions, climate active emissions, have been contributed by these other gases, or in the case of black carbon, it's a particle, many of which are short-lived. Not all of it. Nitrous oxide is not. It does stay up in the atmosphere for centuries, but some are very short-lived, like black carbon, methane about 12 years or so. The hydrofluorocarbons, rather variable, but around 15 years, and tropospheric ozone, which is, of course, a secondary pollutant, a matter of weeks or so. So they have variable effects, local and global, to variable degrees. And what I'm just briefly going to summarise is the implications for human health, the emissions of some of these pollutants. So let me start with this slide, because it's the kind of official WHO data, the deaths linked to outdoor and household air pollution. You can see that according to WHO it's about 7 million. Other estimates suggest a bit more. WHO tends to keep its estimates constant to avoid keep changing as new data comes on board. But the important thing to notice here is what these deaths are due to. And you can see that 20% due to pneumonia, about 20% from stroke, birds and ischemic heart disease, nearly 20% from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and about 7% from lung cancer. So it has an impact on a whole range of different health outcomes. Indeed, this is rather a conservative list, and so there are others as well, like Alzheimer's disease, for example, which is probably dementia in the elderly, probably related, as well as I'll come on to. And the other important thing to note is that WHO air quality guideline levels are lower than they were 50 years ago, and that's because a lot more is now understood about the effects of low-level exposure to air pollution. So there's no safe level, of course, but as you can see from this side, fine particulate matter is now 5 micrograms per cubic metre, the guideline that is, having been substantially higher than that in 2005. And you can see that all of them really have come down because of this growing awareness of the impacts of low levels of air pollution in human health. So there's no real safe level as far as we know. And that also implies that over 95% of the world's population is breathing air which is above these long-term air quality guideline levels. So every part of the world is affected by air pollution, some obviously more than others. But air pollution affects people throughout their lifetime. It can cause low birth weight, exposures in pregnancy. In children, it can be associated with a slow development of lung function, development problems, neurodevelopment problems, probably more wheezing and coughs. In adults, you can see the list here, I won't read them all out again. It's notable to see that diabetes appears on the list. There's substantial evidence that diabetes risk is increased by air pollution. And in the elderly, again, similar situation, but also this possibility of increasingly likely, I think, that it's linked to dementia, which of course is a major public health issue. Look, a couple of years ago, we published a paper led by a colleague, Jos Ehleveld, at the Max Planck Institute, for chemistry in Mainz, in Germany, estimating the numbers of air pollution deaths that were due to the burning of fossil fuels. This is this ambient air pollution, it doesn't include household air pollution. And you can see at the top the all-cause mortality from all sources of air pollution, and that be estimated to be actually over 8 million, so rather higher than the WHO estimate. And the middle of the map shows you where the all-cause mortality, what it would look like if we could take out all the fossil fuel-related emissions, and you can see it just leaves air pollution in parts of Asia, sub-Saharan Africa, a bit in Latin America. And then if you take out all the anthropogenic emissions, including others like the burning of solid fuels in houses, which spreads out into the ambient atmosphere, then really it just leaves the kind of band across the Sahara and the Middle East, largely due to dust, and Mongolia due to dust, which of course can be made worse by human activities, but is also partly natural. So you can see how the impact of fossil fuels is quite pervasive and affects health in many, many parts of the world. When we burn them, we obviously create CO2, but also the other pollutants as well. But short-lived pollutant mitigation can also benefit human health, and an estimate from a few years ago from UNEP suggested about 2.4 million deaths annually could be averted from measures aiming to reduce black carbon emissions. And obviously you can't just add them together with the fossil fuel emissions because some of them overlap. But you can see that there's a range of sources here, ranging from cooking with cleaner fuels, reducing agricultural burning, reducing flaring, improving the performance of brick kilns, and removing what they call the big smokers, obsolete, poorly maintained diesel engines, for example. So these can benefit human health through reducing black carbon, which has pervasive effects, of course, not just on the climate, but also damage ecosystems, and it can also accelerate the melting of ice, because when it's deposited on ice, accelerates the loss of ice carbon. So that's an important message because it shows how these mitigating these short-lived climate pollutants like black carbon benefits the climate and human health. And then when we look at methane, it's 86 times more powerful than CO2 over a 20-year period. About 42% comes from agriculture, about 36% from fossil fuels, 18% from waste. And of course it's a precursor of tropospheric ozone air pollution, which has been estimated to cause perhaps over 1 million premature deaths annually. And methane can be held responsible for about half of these deaths. Tropospheric ozone exposure increases the risk of respiratory diseases, in particular damages airways and lung tissue in particular. And it's also responsible for substantial yield losses of soy, wheat, rice and maize, so it has indirect effects on health through changes in nutrition, food security and so on. We also know that nitrogen dioxide, which is caused, of course, by the burning of fossil fuel use in land transportation and power generation, and to some extent the burning of solid fuels in households. This contributes to the risk of asthma in children and adolescents. NO2 is also has an impact on other health outcomes as well. But this map just shows you from a paper of a few years ago where the incident cases of asthma in children and adolescents from this ambient NO2 air pollution, where they're experienced. There are about 3.5 million worldwide annually, about 14% of the total of the incident cases of asthma, according to the estimations in this paper. And you can see the diverse impacts across the world, substantial obviously in Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, parts of Latin America, but also in Europe and other parts of the world as well. So NO2 is also important air pollution, and as I say, comes mainly mostly from the burning of fossil fuels. And it's important to remember, although one of the earlier slides talked about clean cooking, it's important to emphasise that gas is not entirely clean cooking. And in fact, a recent estimate from colleagues in Spain has suggested that it could be about 40,000 annual deaths from exposure to gas cooking in Europe, and hundreds of thousands of paediatric asthma cases as well in the EU and the UK as a result of gas cooking exposure. So it's increasingly important to move towards electric cooking, induction hobs obviously is the main technology there, and this could have substantial public health benefits even in high-income regions. It's important not to miss out the food system, because the food system is a major source of methane, of course, particularly through ruminant animals, so red meat, some percent dairy, dairy products as well. And there's been a lot of interest, a lot of work on the benefits of moving towards a more plant-forward, or whatever you want to call it, diet, particularly in high-income countries. This is a study undertaken by my colleague Pauline Schilbeek and others a couple of years ago, using data from over 500,000 UK participants in multiple high-quality data sets, including UK Biobank. And she estimated the effect of adhering to what are called the Eat Well diet recommendations, which recommend more plant-based foods, less red meat, less ultra-processed foods, and so on. And that was associated with a 7% reduced risk of mortality and a 30% lower risk of dietary, lower dietary greenhouse gas emissions, particularly through reductions in methane. So again, benefits to the climate, benefits to human health, not necessarily directly through air pollution, but through the changes in dietary consumption. And then, of course, nitrous oxide, as well, important greenhouse gas, rather neglected in the past, quite a long-lived greenhouse gas. And this recent work by the Climate Clean Air Coalition and others has shown the benefits of mitigating nitrous oxide emissions. Much of this comes from agriculture. A little bit also in healthcare as well. Nitrous oxide, of course, is used as an anaesthetic agent. But a lot of it comes from land use, a bit from industry and fossil fuels and so on. The implementation of N2O abatement measures could result in 40% reduction in these anthropogenic N2O emissions by mid-century, which would be the equivalent of about 6 years of current CO2 emissions, so really very significant. Would also, by the way, reduce the degradation of the stratospheric ozone. So remember that ozone at the ground level, the troposphere, is bad for us if we inhale it. In the stratosphere, of course, it protects us from ultraviolet radiation. So, and it could help to reduce the depletion of stratospheric ozone and benefit health partly through that as well, but also to reduce air pollution, as you can see, substantial benefits from reductions in premature deaths from N2O mitigation. If you want to know more about some of the climate mitigation actions that will also benefit health, co-benefits, not just through air pollution, but through diet, physical activity and so on, we've created a climate and health evidence bank funded through the Wellcome Trust under our Pathfinder initiative, which quantifies and makes explicit the healthcare benefits of climate change mitigation actions. And then in conclusion, let me emphasise the fact that there could be multiple benefits of addressing these super pollutants. So on the left you can see if we the difference between just implementing CO2 mitigation actions and then including all the other short-lived climate pollutants. It doesn't include nitrous oxide on that in this particular illustration. Obviously that would increase the mitigation benefit as well. But you can see that really we can only keep below 2 degrees if we mitigate both CO2 and the short-lived climate pollutants, and of course adding into that N2O as well. And well-targeted, well-designed, well-implemented strategies can actually benefit the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, human development in general, by reducing poverty, reducing food insecurity, improving crop yields, of course, improving access to clean, affordable energy, of course, contributing to more sustainable settlements and habitations, and a range of other SDGs. So there are potential multiple benefits from well-designed policies to address super pollutants, in addition, of course, to CO2 mitigation, that can benefit our health, but also the climate, environment, and our prospects for development more generally. Thank you very much.
Pass on the applause to Andy. And I should have said when I introduced him, he's Professor of Environmental Change and Public Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And he's also, you'll probably know, contributed to multiple IPCC assessments and chaired major commissions like the Lancet Commission on Planetary Health. And it struck me, just watching the presentation, that both we have seen a huge increase in the amount of health impact evidence over the last 10 years. I saw a graph of it recently, and it's exponentially increased in publications on the health impact of pollution. And also that we've known all of this for a really long time, both the health impacts and the solutions. That black carbon one from 2011 with like all of the solutions out there that we just haven't really focused on. So we're now going to move into a panel talking more about the health impacts, but also more about the solutions end of things. I don't see Martina Otto, but there she's at the back. So Martina Otto, if you can come up as I'm introducing you all, that would be fab. Obviously head of the CCAC Secretariat, who we're very delighted to work with closely on a near daily basis, and to co-host the event with today. Peter Derry, who's here representing the Ghanaian government, and is also a long-time air quality advocate, director of the Climate Change and Environment Ministry. David Foster with the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office as an air quality advisor, and Ana Flavia Veloso Parenga, a sustainability leader at Inter-IKEA Group. We may be joined by another panelist, so if you could sit on this chair just across one, Anna, thank you, and I will introduce her when she comes, if she can make it. She's been tied up elsewhere. So we're going to have a quick panel discussion, and then we will have time for questions from the audience. So if you have anything that you want to ask, please be preparing that. And I want to turn first of all to Martina, because you've been working on this through various roles in your career for a long while, cities and other angles on the topic, and now with a focus on super pollutants and air quality and climate. What tools and resources are available to support countries in planning for the integration of these topics? And do you have examples of how they're being used now?
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here together on this panel. And in terms of tools, well, you got a little bit of a flavor of what Andy already presented. We do integrated assessments. That's part of our science work stream with our scientific advisory panel. And those assessments, as you could tell, are not only highlighting the problem, but highlight the multiple benefits that we can take from the integrated action, and they point to concrete solutions. That's how we make this science policy interaction quite nicely. There is one on the African region, for example. So we talked a lot about the global one. There was one in 2011 that gave rise to the birth of the CCAC. We did one more recently for the African region, and one of the recommendations in there is to create an Africa Clean Air program. And whoever was in the room, we had an earlier session on the Africa Clean Air program. That really was the starting point for it. So often it is to raise the political sort of will, but also to pinpoint to concrete solutions. That's one form of tool that we have. Something else we do is helping countries with their integrated planning, and that goes back to the use of the IPC tool, but it really helps to quantify the benefits from the multiple benefits from the actions that we do propose. And there's a concrete example that, for example, in Nigeria, we were able to quantify very much the health benefits from the actions proposed in the NDC. That's another one. And the third tool, and then maybe I'll stop. A third tool is the Air Quality Management Exchange Platform. That's something that was requested at the last UN Environment Assembly. It was a way to close a capacity gap that has been identified as being one of the biggest stumbling blocks alongside finance for taking more air quality action. And we put together a group of people whose day-to-day business it is to look into that. And we came forward with guidance, curated guidance around key priority areas, plus a whole resource library And that's available and that's being used through trainings already to help very concretely quality managers. And maybe I should mention that, sorry, I said I would stop. But a last thing that is, we have our sector hubs. They're really important to focus on the solutions. There's one on household energy, and then I look at my friend in the front row looking at clean cooking solutions, for example. We work on the fossil fuel sector as well with a fossil fuel regulatory program. Yet again, that's another way of driving action. We have identified solutions in agriculture and in waste, for example. So there's a whole range of areas that we cover through that and provide guidance and tools. And we have countries that are using them very concretely through projects that we support as well. Maybe I stop, but
Thank you.
there's a wealth, right?
There is a
huge
wealth
program.
And I think that was part of the challenge that the AQMX was designed to tackle, right? There's a lot of resources out there, but they're not always discoverable. So concentrating them in one place and having an easy window into them is something that people had highlighted that they would benefit from. So Peter, when you've been working on this topic for a very long time at the ministry as co-chair of the CCAC for a while, and you have witnessed this development of the African Clean Air Programme and also been responsible for a lot of national policy in Ghana. I wonder if you could tell us kind of what are your headlines on how initiatives like ACAP can support cities and national governments in developing and influencing evidence-based air quality policies, and what are you proudest of?
Okay, so thank you very much. Having a regional program is very important for integration and also for wider results. But then it's more important to ensure that the regional program is connected to national policy and also by extension to sub-national policies. And how can this happen? In many ways. The idea behind this regional program is to have centers of excellence maybe established, and then they could serve as a hub, a regional hub for data collection and also data dissemination. And we know that for every effective policy to be developed, we need data, high quality data, not just any data. So that could be one way of assisting nations and also sub-national authorities to be able to develop well-designed and very accurate policies. Beyond that, the ACAP could also set up a committee of practice and have a compendium of good policies on air quality. That can also be shared, at the national level and also at the sub-national level, so that people don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, if there's something to start with, it's very easy to tweak that and then you can make quick progress. I believe that most of the countries have similar issues, and therefore similar solutions can be used across board and implicated. So that's another opportunity in there. Beyond that, we also think that the Center of Excellence can help build capacity of national level experts and sub-national level experts to be able to develop these policies and implement them, because beyond developing the policies comes implementation. And they could also create that kind of South-South cooperation and even sister city relations. The ACAP can help facilitate that, where cities, for example, in Ghana can have relations with cities either within Africa or even beyond Africa, and then they can exchange and learn and begin to see how they can help each other in terms of policy and development. So that's also another important area. And of course, ACAP, at the end of the day, we have to bring in infrastructure, and this infrastructure will not be located anywhere than in cities and in countries where you are going to collect that kind of information. And so by doing that, you are also assisting the countries to meet the infrastructure needs in terms of air quality, information management, that systems that they develop in countries. So there are quite a number of things that ACAP can do to support nations and also sub-national governments. But what is important is that whatever structures that are developed at the regional level, that direct connection with the national level and the subnational is very, very important. And that's why we need to carry everyone along. We need to carry subnational governments, we need to carry national governments, because they are, at the end of the day, going to own that program. They are going to be the implementers. That's where the action is going to happen, and that's where we can make good results. So this is what I'll say at this point, and I believe that ACAP is already on the path of, towards doing that, and if we work very hard, we should be able to, in the next couple of years, see changes happening at the national level and also at the subnational level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I won't come to you now because I want to make sure we've got time for audience questions, but I would be interested to know what is the piece of advice that you have received, or piece of evidence that has been generated in Ghana that has been the most impactful. We'll come back to that later if we have time. So moving on to David Foster. The UK, we heard from Bill Parrish at DEFRA earlier on in the panel just before about what the UK has been doing on transboundary pollution, cooperating in Europe. But I know that you're working with other donor countries and you're also focused on helping other governments around the world make the case for stronger air quality investments by linking pollution reduction to health and economic benefits. So from the UK as a donor perspective, tell us your experience.
Thank you very much, Jane. And thank you to the Clean Air Fund and the CCC for inviting me to speak today. I think you said we covered quite a lot on the regional side of things in the previous session, so I'll try not to duplicate, but I should say that the UK is a huge advocate of the regional approach, right from the time we founding members of the UNECE Air Convention, and that really continues today in terms of our support through the Climate Action for Resilient Asia programme. So this is where we've partnered with the World Bank to work on an air quality management programme amongst 4 countries in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. So again, looking very much at the airshed level, and we're seeing some real results in that regional work. And in an area where there are quite significant political sensitivities, it's still having real impact. And perhaps also worth just saying why we think a regional approach is good, why we think it's been effective so far. And I think there are a few reasons for this. So better data sharing is a real key. When you start to look at things on a regional airshed level, you start to see you get significantly better monitoring and forecasting if you just look at sort of national portals alone. And that really helps when you're looking at how a health system responds and how a health system prepare for particularly bad days for air pollution, particularly hazardous events like that. So that's certainly one advantage. I think the regional approach also enables pooling of resources and reducing duplication. So there's a value for money element here as well. That's everybody likes value for money. I think particularly in low resource settings, that's a real benefit of the regional approach. And then something I think which is overlooked on the regional side is how it can really foster political will and help to maintain that. So some regional agreements are legally binding, some aren't, but even those that aren't, they really do draw countries into maintaining their commitments and implementing their commitments. So nobody wants a reputational hit about backing out halfway through. It must be seen as the back marker in this. So it really can help maintain momentum. So a few reasons there why we think regional approach is the way to go, and one of the reasons the UK has been keen to support the Africa Clean Air Programme. I mean, I think in terms of the point, Jane, on how the UK can support countries to bring out the health and economic benefits and how that can be leveraged to draw in investment. I think it is that combination of benefits which is really important, so both health and economic. I would add climate to that as well, because I think it's the combination of impacts which is a real strength of air pollution activity. And I think in pretty challenging ODA environments, those activities which can have an impact on a number of different objectives are going to be all the more attractive to donors. And I think that's something which air pollution activity really has in its favour. I think there are probably 2 key things which donors can do to provide support at this stage. first is around defining, supporting countries to really define the problem locally in very quantitative terms. So we've done this quite recently in South Africa, where we supported the Medical Research Council to undertake some research about the health impacts of living near coal-fired power stations. That found a 6% higher risk of experiencing those health impacts from air pollution if individual lives in those locations. Also found that children were by far the most affected group. Now, I don't think those stats will necessarily surprise anyone in this room, but in terms of funding strategic research who's going to build a case for action locally, those kind of things are really important to do. And then I think the second thing is supporting countries to evidence the potential impact of an activity or the intervention they want to be funded. And I think this is slightly trickier. So on the health side, very much do this with health impact assessments. And then it's on the AQMX platform, which was spoken about earlier. And they help a country to sort of define what impact a given activity will give, and then they can use that to experience as a partially investment case. I think there are a few of those types of resources on the economic side at the moment, and I think that's potentially a gap that donors could look to move forward. There are a couple of the US EPA have a couple of that kind of models, but I think it's a less well developed area of resources. And I think if you're able to then very clearly define the problem and articulate the impact that an intervention can have, I think that makes it quite a strong investment.
Thank you. And yeah, we were referencing that exact example on the previous panel. The US EPA have calculated that for every dollar spent on an air quality intervention, $30 are saved. But we were saying there are very few case studies or those kinds of statistics from elsewhere in the world. So we're in full agreement with you that we need more of that. So Anna, Inter-IKEA and the IKEA group as a whole are members of the Alliance for Clean Air, which is this alliance of multinational companies set up by the World Economic Forum that are now quantifying and reporting and aiming to reduce air pollutants, super pollutants, greenhouse gases in parallel, and making reduction plans. And IKEA really has been at the forefront of that. I know at just at the end of this session, for only 15-20 minutes, we're going to do a mini session on guidance that supports companies report against the requirements that are coming up in the regulation. So we'll tackle that later. But for now, I wondered if you could tell us how IKEA and the alliance companies that you're working with in that group support countries to achieve their ambitions, and how could national government in turn support the leading companies in this area to reduce their pollutants too?
Great, thank you very much. Just to clarify, the Inter-IKEA group is the owner of the IKEA brand and responsible for the full value chain. There are many synergies that we see between the actions that we are taking to decarbonize our value chain and into accounting and mitigating air pollution. As a business with a global reach, we have a responsibility and we are committed to reducing air pollutants, and we have net zero targets, and that for us to make sure that we reach our targets by 2050 and 2030, we were able to detail and create a roadmap. That roadmap is very sectorial and is looking into all of the different actions together with our suppliers. So just by mapping that, it's an incredible and powerful tool to showcase to governments the actions and the business opportunities that we have by joining forces and tackling some of the issues in those sectors and regions. Also it's also a very good exercise for us as we disclose our emission factors on air pollutants, that we can address the gaps that we have in our strategies, and that we can find ways of collaborating and finding solutions for these gaps.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your efforts on this, because I believe that IKEA was the first multinational company to ever publish your air pollution footprint, I don't know if you call it that, in the annual report. This is putting you on the spot a little bit here, but And if you feel comfortable, can you tell us a little bit about how that process was for you, how you came to decide to do it, and what response you've had from your customers and your employees about doing it?
Well, it always brings a lot of proudness internally and with our customers also. But I mean, everybody already said here that the evolution is really impacting the business globally, and part of our sustainability strategy is really to create a compelling and sustainable platform. And so when we started working together with SEI, CCAC, and CAF, it was a COP. It's important that we started to think, okay, how can we create more visibility, understand our impact, be able to disclose that and take action, and identify those gaps. So it was a long process. SEI has helped a lot in making sure that we can use the same data that we have today, and really just fine-tuning and then using the right emission factors to be able to have the full visibility. Of course, we still have a long journey to go. We still don't have enough data, as you were saying, for certain sectors, specifically on the material side and food ingredients. But it's still a journey that we're going, and we're hoping in the near future to be able to have that visibility. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, it does. And thank you for your bravery in pioneering it. I know with the other companies that were part of this alliance, it was a bit of a step into the unknown. They first of all committed to report on their air pollution footprint and reduce it, and then work with the CCAC and SEI in writing this guide to figure out how exactly to do it. So it took a lot of bravery and vision to embark on that project. So now over to you all. We're going to come for audience questions. We've got a good 20 minutes, so if anybody have anything that they want to ask, if you could introduce yourself when you do, and also if your question is targeted towards a specific panelist, let us know who. I don't know if we have a mic, or people should just, just in the middle there.
Thank you. Mark Broomfield from Ricardo. I heard this morning about a couple of comments about voluntary initiatives that were perhaps less successful in delivering air quality improvements. I think Peter mentioned one in your presentation this morning. I also thought about the ASEAN haze policy, which is good, but also lacks the sort of teeth to do stuff. Whereas I think we've heard some positive messages about voluntary initiatives as well. So what are the circumstances? What makes a good voluntary initiative versus a mandatory initiative? We also heard about the UNECE program in Europe for emissions ceilings, which has been very successful in reducing emissions, but that has legal force. What makes a good voluntary initiative? How can you make a voluntary initiatives work effectively?
Thank you, Mark. And we'll take a couple more as well if anybody has anything else.
Thank you. Ed Brown from Loughborough University. David, particularly, I wanted to ask. In the session this morning, I perhaps rather ill-advisedly talked about the difficulties in working across government. I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about how the different departments engaged in these issues in the UK, international, work together, and kind of what the plans are going forward.
Thank you. Two great questions. So we'll come back to you all. So, panelists, who would like to take the question about what makes a good voluntary initiative? What are the characteristics? Go for it.
First up. So, I think that there is, clearly legally binding agreements are sort of the gold standard, I guess. I think that's where where you're going to get almost 100% quickly 100% adherence to the targets. I think in terms of what makes a good voluntary initiative or agreements. So the WHO conference in Cartagena, the target there is a voluntary target. And I think what's going to be important in securing that is having a very broad set of countries, not only countries but organisations, private sector, businesses sign up to it, so a very broad level of support. Having accountability mechanisms built in, they don't have to be legal. The WHO, for instance, have a climate and health survey, which I think is every 2 years, which measures progress, which is obviously voluntary reporting, but which measures progress in the policy space on climate and health work. That is then published, and I think acts as a mechanism for seeing who has implemented the commitments that they've made, albeit non-legally binding, and that can still have the sort of name and shame effect, I guess, if that's the way it's going to go. So I mean, I think there are various models for doing that, but I don't necessarily think just because something's not legally binding that really wouldn't necessarily come from.
Thank you. And yeah.
Maybe to comment on that point as well. I think co-creation in the first place, so that you have buy-in, is absolutely critical since it is a voluntary thing. And in that discussion, building trust and pushing the boundaries, and that only works if you've built the trust, and then thereby branching out a little bit as well. And then having, and now it depends very much what kind of initiative we talk about, but having a support mechanism in place as well that helps do it. Now, I'm not talking about industry standards because that's slightly different then, but I'm talking how we can help countries, and that something that's voluntary is a really good first step into it, and then see how you can actually tighten it up as you go once you've built further trust as well, and there's confidence that it can be achieved and so on.
Yeah, well, for us, I mean, when we embarked on this journey, it was really important to be with reliable partners. And then the other thing was more like the challenge to really address the full value chain. So it was more like, can we even do this together? And I think that's where the alliance is there. We have over 8 companies already disclosing on pollutants, and so it's doable. So I think that the next phase is really how can we get more people join forces to, or other businesses to disclose on things.
Some great points there, and I think the one that I had been closest to was this Alliance for Clean Air, and all of the things that David and Martina said about other government-based voluntary initiatives I think were present, right? Like strong standards, trust, the ability to tighten later, I think, with upcoming regulation, and the support mechanisms. I think the one of the issues that the Alliance is facing, and I'm sure many voluntary initiatives face, is how to do this expansion to more companies whilst also keeping the standards high. How do you make it inclusive enough that people want to join, and not too strict, but also not water it down? So, David, there was also the question of how different departments across the UK government are working together on air quality. If I paraphrase that correctly.
Are we on the record?
Sorry, David.
No problem at all. And I think in terms of FCDO, this is something we see kind of internationally as well. It's quite difficult sometimes when speaking to any given country, knowing which ministry to start. Sometimes it's health, sometimes it's energy, sometimes it's environment. So I think it's a common problem. I think in terms of the UK specifically, I was just trying to list a number of departments which I think have an interest in air pollution work. There's at least 6 or 7, I think. And I think it's fair to say that cooperation between individual ministries has been patchy on this. I think DEFRA as the domestic lead, FCDO as the research and development lead on this issue, and then DESNA as the lead on methane. That triangle has worked quite well. But I think what's really improved broader HMG cooperation in recent months has been our taking over the co-chair of the Climate and Air Coalition, actually, and having a UK Minister Karen McCarthy, as the co-chair for that, and really banging heads together a bit in Whitehall to get people to sort of combine efforts, combine resources, and come up with sort of priorities for the CCAC. I think has been really useful. So I think those sorts of factors can be really helpful in getting better coordination across it.
maybe to testify, indeed. It's amazing that there is a whole, when we have meetings together to look at how we drive certain things forward. There's a full group of folks from different departments, and I think it's really interesting to see. So I think well done on that end. And maybe to go back a little bit to the tools, the quality management exchange platform that I mentioned is really designed for quality managers, but we will add in chapters for key sectors. And the idea is not to cover the whole sector, but to help the quality managers how to speak, how to address, how to interest, what to ask for from their colleagues in the line ministries of the key sectors. So that's an entry point. And this is how do you create this dialogue? How do you see that there's a mutual interest in this? And obviously, maybe I should have started by saying, well, Ministry of Health and Air Quality Standards, so the WHO sort of stream, but it's for an impact angle where we want to see better health as an outcome. Now, the Ministry of Environment look at it from the emissions side, and then we need to translate all of that to make it actionable. We need fuel standards, vehicle standards, we need all of the above, right? And that's where it comes back to the line ministries, and that's where this is all about. So I think it's a critical question you ask, and if you have one way or the other, someone who helps coordinate, and I think maybe that's something that Peter can testify as well. What it does, we've supported over 30 countries now with national experts, and obviously that's only one person, and that's better than nothing. It's a person whose job it is to help build these bridges, and it's a resource that we provide and that embedded in each of the ministries one way or the other. It depends on what the countries actually want. We only do that on request, I should say. It's not something that's enforced, but it's a resource, and it often is seen as a cost factor. But if we can take that out a little bit, and it starts building those bridges, we see the interest coming together.
Yeah, we've not seen a huge number of examples globally of good cross-government collaboration on the clean air. The two that we've seen, there's a department, I don't know what you call them department, David, a collaborative department of the British government, the Joint Air Quality Unit, which was DEFRA and the Department for Transport together, just to implement clean air zones, and I think that has therefore gone now. And in Poland, a ministerial position on clean air, planning potentially for clean air, who did this kind of collaborative function, but at the ministerial level. But I would be interested if anyone in the audience has good examples of where governments have managed it. Any additional questions? We have time for a couple more in the middle, and then we can take these three, and then we will wrap.
Good afternoon, Bruno Carrasco from the Asian Development Bank. Asia and Pacific has 99 of the most polluted, 9 out of 100 most polluted. It's all, sorry.
It did make a noise when you tapped it. You just need to hold it closer. Yeah, that works. You might need to just hold it close. Yeah.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Asia Pacific has 99 of the 100 worst polluted cities. We recognize it's hard enough cleaning cities and countries. David, you mentioned the importance of the interscandiatic air shift. Clearly, pollution is a transboundary issue. We're also at the Asian Development Bank looking at how we can support more work in this area, also looking with the World Bank. It's an important regional cooperation initiative, but we know how difficult it is for countries to kind of agree on such things despite clear benefits. Is there anything that you have found in the work that you're doing that gives us reason to hope? Thank you.
Can we just take these two? Thank you, David, and we'll two more, and then we will go to whichever panelist wants to answer these.
So thank you so much for the presentation. So I wanted to particularly support pollutants. We know how we have the social costs of CO2 and how that's helped to thoughts on developing social metrics for, say, carbon, what you think would be like the ultimate, and how that will, I mean, considering the uncertainties around, that, do you think it's a step into push this narrative further, or just what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. And I'm just behind.
Yeah, hi, I'm Stephen Bland with the World Resource Institute. We have been running a program called the Clean Air Catalyst for some years that I know some colleagues are aware of. First of all, I just wanted to give an example actually of that intergovernmental collaboration that's happening in Nairobi at the moment through this Nairobi Air Quality Technical Working Group, which is very much a national co-chairs with the county and WRI and soon to be Clean Air Funds and Green Cities are involved in that work, and that's a great example. You asked for an example, sorry. There's a real good cross-sector collaboration happening in Nairobi at the moment. And I just wanted to ask the question around sort of the political economy of getting actual air pollution solutions implemented in my interest, particularly in cities, but it's relevant across countries. And if the panel have any experiences or good insights to share about kind of bringing together these quite different worlds of air quality management, data collection, getting in the infrastructure for monitoring, which we do in our work, and at the same time engaging with kind of non-atmospheric science community in cities, the political engagement, the root causes of some of these emissions. So we really try hard to bring together the atmospheric scientists with the political economists and social scientists, and it's a real interesting mix of perspectives and views, and just interested if anyone has experience or insights on that. Thanks.
Thank you. And so first to David, and what gives you hope?
So I mean, certainly from our experience of working in the LGBT, I think this work takes patience. I think is one thing. So particularly in areas where there are political considerations, building trust takes time. And I think one of the lessons we've learned is that you have to start with the less sensitive issues. So sharing of experiences about things like how you communicate on air pollution to the general public, things like that, which are relatively uncontroversial issues. At the other end of the spectrum is exchange of data, which in some parts of the world, even across one border, can be very, very sensitive. So that's at the other end of the scale. It takes much longer to reach those points. I think something that we have found is that working at the technical level, at least to start with, is a good way of getting some cooperation going. There's less of the politics involved. Sometimes the relationships are already there at the technical level that you can build on, and then once that's working well, people start to brief their politicians to say this is going well, the risks are not huge here, and there's real benefit in doing this. I think it's at that point where you can get politicians involved in ways of really seeing the levels, and at some point, many politicians start to see it as a vote winner, as something that comes in their favour to really address. But I think starting at that technical level is the way to go.
I just wanted to share an example with the situation we have in Ghana. Sometimes it's a narrative. When we wanted to have political buy-in on climate during the first NDCs that we have developed, we had serious resistance from the government. I told my colleagues, you know what? We have to turn the narrative upside down. We have to start from development to climate. We have always started from climate to development. That is not working. That's not what the politician wants to do. So you start from development and you link that claim to the public. That is what changed the discussion in Ghana. And immediately, the president himself requested that we come and make a presentation in Canada. And I was fortunate to be there myself, with some colleagues to do that presentation. When we came out, they told me that this is good. So sometimes it's the way we carry it out. Politicians too want to hear too many figures, too many signs. They don't have time for that. What they want to use, how do you link development to the problem or the issue? And don't start from the problem. Start with the solution, because that's what they want to hear first. And then you tell them that, well, before you can get the solution, you need to address ABC. And that is what is required. So I just wanted to share this experience. I hope it's not too different from many countries also.
I think, yes, I think many of us experienced that one. How about the cost of black carbon? Is that something that we might see coming on the agenda, either of carbon markets at the time, and given the uncertainties in the measurement and other things that's been suggested? A lot of raised eyebrows, by which I'm taking we don't think so anytime soon. Anyone want to comment on maybe why not? You've got an answer down here.
We're currently doing a piece of work with Berkeley Air, looking at what the potential for adding a component on black carbon to the mixed meeting methodology that we have with the gold standard. There are a range of issues with that. Number one is, can we get everyone to buy into that? But if we view it as an addition to the carbon methodology for a potential additional payment, that's the way that we're thinking that we can go about it. So watch this space, I think, in terms of the development of the methodology. This is just clean cooking methodology. There may well be other opportunities, and just that's one little way of hope potentially.
Thank you. Yeah, that might be where it starts, giving clean cooking and its space in the carbon markets at the minute. So Johan might also have an answer.
Yeah, because
And another one at the back.
yeah, during this conference discussion, I was scientific advisor at panel, so the experts are there.
I'll probably pass very quickly to Drew, who can give a much better answer to this. But I suppose we just need to be very careful in moving this way. You know, we don't want to sort of create competition. We want all of these issues to be, you know, dealt with, and so whatever we come up with should support that, not put one commission against another. And then, of course, there are all the uncertainties, and black carbon is never a mission on its own. You know, so you know, in terms of climate impact, it's not easy, and it has very much a different global and regional impact. But I'll let Drew say something more intelligent.
I was going to say the same thing. So Johan's already done it. Now, I mean, I think it's important we just be cognizant that, you know, by definition, a market is trading amongst different options. And trading amongst different options amongst the short-lived climate pollutants makes a lot of sense to get to an optimal solution. Least cost, mitigating near-term climate change. But trading between near and long-term is a lot of complex ethical issues that one would have to keep in mind. And probably something, you know, people have talked about, say, having baskets, and you want to deal with the long-lived species, and you want to deal with the short-lived, but you don't really want to necessarily trade between one and the other. And then, as Johan mentioned, like AC is almost never emitted on its own. So if you just have a price associated with those emissions, it doesn't necessarily even correspond to the final emission. So hopefully we'll get more information as the science continues to develop, and regional impacts may dwarf the global ones anyway. You know, maybe that's something we need a local pact where groups that are primarily affected by, say, the monsoon, all want to get together and deal with emissions from South Asia. And I think there are models that can work, but it's just the second what Johan says, we need to be careful.
Thank you. Good question, that one, with a deep answer. And it's interesting to me that people think that monetizing it therefore makes it competitive with carbon dioxide, which would not have crossed my mind. So the last question from Stephen is about how to bring together different component parts and individuals in the system, from the data and monitoring and atmospheric science side through the politics to people responsible for some of the sources. Does anybody have experience of doing that and how it is done well or badly?
Generally, this I call this the science policy dichotomy. It cuts across different issues. It's not only on the subject that we are discussing. What I normally tell my scientist friends is how we need to learn to unpack information. Sometimes the information is too heavy, for the politician and for the policymaker. And I had one senior colleague of mine who cracked a joke. He says, when a politician doesn't understand, in order not to expose his ignorance, he says, it's not proof. Simple as that. It makes it easy. So you bring it to him, he doesn't want to tell you, he doesn't understand. Just to make it easy, not approve, finish. So we need to learn that. We need to understand that. And so it's a process that we need to continue to work around. It's not going to be very easy. I understand the scientific language. It's not also easy to unpack sometimes. Sometimes you just have to state it as it is. But then we must make that conscious effort to kind of try to reduce that heavy burden on policymakers in order to not tell them to say that it's not approved just because they don't understand. And then we need to improve on the engagements, constant engagements, bring them around the table from time to time. I was telling someone during the break that what I have realized sometimes is that we want to finish the technical bit of it and then we then bring in politicians. It doesn't work that way. You have to carry them along as you are developing the technical part of it. So that by the time you finish, then they have walked the journey with you and they can appreciate it better. But when you finish doing everything, it looks so complex and now you come and dump it on them, it becomes very difficult sometimes to understand. So that is what I would say on this, but it's a problem also for us, especially in the developing countries also. It's quite challenging, this science policy dichotomy. It's a big issue.
Thank you. And I'm going to finish with a very quick fire question, or the same question to all of you, because they were two very good pieces of advice there from Peter. Explain things simply and get politicians involved from the start. If you could give a peer one very good piece of advice who is getting involved in the clean air movement starting from now, what would it be? Or what is the best piece of advice you yourself have received? And just in a sentence, let me know what that might be. And then we will wrap.
So I think the advice I would give is that we need to identify people who also have passion for the subject. That should be a very good entry point. So within the political class, we are doing that in Ghana, especially in Parliament, where we have identified a number of parliamentarians who are interested on climate issues, and we have sought to go with them to different fora on climate change. You know, we go along with them, we sponsor sometimes, and now they've become champions in Parliament. Sometimes we get to Parliament, the questions come and they are ready to answer, or they are able to convince their colleagues that no, that's not what it is, and this is what exactly it is. So you need to get people, you need to identify those people, because it's easier to develop those people as champions than to get people who do not have passion for the subject. So that would be
Passion.
passion. Identify them.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Martina.
Join the CCSE.
Very simple. Very good advice.
But why? Because you're part of a club of like-minded people, and you inspire and you get inspired. And I think it goes right back to, it's about people taking the action, and sometimes where you get the passion from, or you have to show that you have the passion for something. And maybe a last little bit, if I may, on the science policy. I can tell you that our science policy dialogues, and no matter whether we do them during the ministerial meeting or whether we do them at our annual meeting, they're a hit. People love them. And we have a request to do them more regularly because it gives people ideas. And maybe it's thanks to Drew in particular, how he presents it, that it gets across the right way. But it's hugely helpful.
David?
So for me, it'd be the importance of partnerships. that's within one's own government, whether that's the platform like the CCC, whether that's between donor and developing countries. No one can do this alone, so that cooperation.
Well, I'm going to summarize more or less what everybody already said. Tackling the root cause of air pollution is possible. We have the solutions, and real progress only happens when we join forces. Yeah. Also, if there are businesses in the room, we really welcome them to join forces.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
I would request you to stay in the room because we have a short panel for launching the guidance for private sector. You can stay and Anna can stay. Okay. So we can still have to stand around for another 15 minutes to get a bit of insight into
Yeah, very good. Are you here for me?
Maybe if I could ask you to give it another 15 minutes so that we can do this if you're interested in this topic and then have this conversation.
Yes, Ricardo, yes, I saw that, and I know that we are in debt with we haven't met, just thank you very much. Just the whole product team.
Updated, integrated business greenhouse gas and pollution assessment. And Anna already mentioned it, so you don't have to send it. We don't make that too formal. And you mentioned it already, the thing started from a corridor talk. So, I mean, for all those who are having the discussions over there, it's not only, you go to these meetings and it's a lot of talking, but it's a place where ideas are born, where we come together and innovate as well, and we build that trust and that partnership, and that's what happened with IKEA. It was two colleagues from the CCAC and colleagues on your end, and coming together saying, wouldn't that be a good thing to have? And it started from the solution, wouldn't it be a good thing to have, and then how can we get it done? How can we come up with something that makes us work across the full value chain? And that's always a difficult one. And so thank you for the courage as well, and the partnership in this. And then obviously we've been teaming up with NCI on getting it done. And we had this first round, and you heard already part of the story and how that helped inform what was going on with the World Economic Forum as well, and obviously the success within the house in IKEA. But we now said it was time to update it, and that's what we have done. And I just want to reflect on the fact that the World Economic Forum highlighted that just 8 global supply chains are responsible for over 50% of global CO2 emissions. And as we all know, and we just had that, the CO2 emissions are hardly ever emitted alone. And the air pollution element comes right on the heels here. So I think it's really, really important to look into that, how we can tackle the co-emission here of those air pollutions that threaten health as well as food security. And I think we'll hear a little more about the 10 companies that have already gone down the path of applying, and how we can actually scale that further. I think that's really important. That's my hope that we get to that point. And with that, I hand over to Eleni to tell us a bit more about the guide.
Thank you. We don't have to do the slides if we can maybe save some time for that.
because I think that Anna and I are here today to tell a story about the guide that was developed with the Climate Clear Coalition and the IKEA team. Maybe it's a story best told without slides. What was very interesting is that, and as you heard earlier from the previous speakers, they spoke about solutions, they spoke about the national level and the local level. And what we wanted to do was take all the experience that the CCAC has working on the national level and the local level and answer a very simple question. How can the private sector quantify air pollutant emissions in the same way that happens at the national and local level? How can this happen in an integrated way? And how can those two components, the public and the private sector, start speaking to each other? With the help and the funding of the CCAC and the IKEA team, we were able to develop the first guide for businesses that allowed companies to quantify air pollutant emissions. And what that did, there was a very key, very milestone moment, because what it did, it allowed the companies to start creating inventories in a way that is extremely similar to how it happens at the national level. The IKEA team and the NCI team, we have worked together to develop what Anna mentioned earlier, the development of the first IKEA inventory for air pollutant emissions. And what the guide allowed the IKEA team to do, and hopefully I can speak to that, was to quantify emissions from electricity consumption, stationary fuel combustion, transport, industry, agriculture, and waste, which are the 6 key emitting sectors for both greenhouse gas and air pollutant emissions. I would like to pause here and maybe go to Anna for their experience, and maybe then we can go back to the new version of the guide.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. And yeah, we went on this journey. It was really holding hands, and SCI was on meetings with our different part of our teams on a weekly basis. We had a lot of challenges to refine the data and make sure that we had the common ground and setting the baseline. But it was really what I can say is that it's possible. We can use the data that we have today, and we can use that to not only identify, where we, if we have certain types of pollutants within our value chain, but also we can look at it very holistically and look at, the gaps. It was really interesting. Just going back, we did the first thing, we published the inventory 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then okay, what are the next steps? So it was right at the time that we were looking at, our transition plan and how we will reach our net zero targets and looking specifically on different sectors. And we were like, okay, so is mitigation scenario here? How much emissions reduction will we have on different pollutants? So it was a quite holistic exercise, but at the end, the result is like that we can prove today with the actions that we have, we're able to reduce by 50% our emissions, air pollutant emissions by 2030. So there's a lot to be done. As I said, there are missing sectors in our data. There are gaps, and we hope that in the next few years, as we are able to have more reliable data on those sectors, that we will be able to disclose and also look at those actions that if we have. And then we know that we are relying on biofuel on the short term, and biofuels they are not really contributing, and we already did some analysis and assessment.
And I'm so happy that Anna, you already mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was wanting to get out of this discussion. The fact that this iteration of the guide, the new guide, the integrated guide that includes greenhouse gas emissions, air pollutant emissions, surface pollutants, and heavy metals, was developed extremely organically by our interaction with the companies of the Alliance for Clean Air, but also the needs and challenges that the companies are facing when it comes to exactly that, the solutions. So with the very close collaboration that we have with the IKEA team, but also with companies like GSK, Bloomberg, Maersk, and Norsk Hydro, we used the earlier version of the guide, not just to develop an inventory, but to develop mitigation scenarios and really understand the impact of existing decarbonization strategies on air pollutant emissions. And that was a very core component that informed the updated integrated guide for businesses because as Anna said, we found ourselves trying to answer questions like, so you have an organization strategy that is aiming to reduce CO2 or even methane. What does that do to air pollutants? What does it do to heavy metals? And that is exactly what informed the need to expand the pollutants and the emissions that we have in the guide, and really, truly have an integrated approach on quantifying these emissions to the atmosphere, but also understanding how to mitigate and reduce them in a holistic way.
Thank you. I think that's nice to show also the collaboration, and it speaks right back to what we said beforehand. It's co-creating. That is absolutely powerful. And we had discussions now for example, in the CCAC board, we had board members say, well, we've done that at home, so at country level, integrated inventories. It's not very easy, and it would be very interesting to compare notes between what is happening at the country, at the national level, with what the industry is doing and are ready to take on, basically. And I think that's the next step, probably, that we make more of those connections and compare notes there too. Not to say, it's a voluntary piece, but it's very good. But also how countries can reckon with that information that does come. So I think it's an interesting one. So watch that space, I'd say. And I don't know whether there's any question in the room about that. So we just wanted to briefly mention that we have the new updated guidelines, and that they're to be used. If there's an interest if you know of companies or people who would be interested in joining the effort, that would be great. Maybe as a next step as well, I should say there's an effort between UNEP and the UN Global Compact to use the guide to reach out to more companies as well, where we can provide some training opportunities around that as well. There's funding coming from Jane on that as well, and I hope I've not stolen the thunder, and I give you the last word on this. We're all hanging in there together.
No thunder stolen. No, I'm just delighted of how far it's all come. IKEA, CCAC and the SEI were busy working on this guide as we were busy working with the World Economic Forum on getting this group of multinational companies together who wanted to do something on clean air. And so it was just a delightful coincidence to combine the two and have a group of companies from a lot of different sectors be able to be guinea pigs for the guide. And a lot of like-minded companies come together to create the the standards and the ambition for what they could do working together, reporting, making it transparent, and working on reduction projects. When I first set up the Clean Air Fund, I did a bit of investigation as to what corporates were doing on clean air, and literally the only thing that I could come up with was the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal. So I think we've come quite a long way since then, and it's one of the first things that we invested in, first of all in India actually, with the Confederation of Indian Industry getting together chief executives for clean air, and then in the UK, and then in Poland, and then this multinational alliance. And even though it only remains at 21 businesses, which sounds like not very many, there are some of the biggest businesses in the world. Maersk, IKEA, obviously, Google, Mahindra, Wipro, these massive conglomerates. So it's quite a feat doing a guide and taking on board all of their feedback, I can imagine, and updating it so that it's relevant for regulation, which since we began this journey has now come in India and in Europe. And we know that in Europe it's being thought of by the European Commissioner as the best practice methodology for complying with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So well done, everyone. I think it deserves a big round of applause that you embarked on this in the first place.
Just to say, only because it's 21, it's a value chain approach, right? You need to get the stuff from